The conference room smelled like lemon-scented bleach and hollow decisions, glass walls, soulless chairs, and the dead-eyed stare of HR Director Monica Dean. Everything about the space was designed to make departures feel sterile, clinical. Like this was a routine procedure, not the slow dismemberment of someone's livelihood. Brant Mallory didn't even look up from his tablet when I sat down. He just clicked something smugly and cleared his throat like he was practicing a TED Talk. Monica folded her hands, voice flat, as she delivered the script. Althea, as part of a strategic realignment, your role has been deemed redundant, effective immediately. A severance package will be outlined in writing, and we encourage you to collect your personal items by end of day. Brant nodded, eyes still on the tablet like he was watching reruns of his own ego. It's not personal, he added almost like a reflex, just restructuring. We're streamlining for Q1. I let the silence grow thick between us, let Monica fidget and Brant start to shift uncomfortably. Then I smiled, not warm, not polite, just enough to make his fingers pause over the screen. You're terminating the architect of the only clause that kept this company alive in 2017. Interesting strategy. Brant looked up for the first time, confused, blinking like I'd just started speaking in Morse code. What clause? Exactly, I said. I stood up slowly, adjusted my coat, and slid my company badge onto the table. That's what happens when you inherit power instead of earning it. Monica flinched. Brant opened his mouth like he might challenge me, but then quickly shut it. I suppose the moment had passed. I walked out with only my purse. No cardboard box of sad desk plants, no stapler swan song, just the measured sound of my heels against the cold tile and the sudden fascination of my co-workers with their screens, their coffee mugs, anything that wasn't me. At my desk, I paused only once to glance at the top drawer I hadn't opened in over a year. Then I kept walking straight through the glass doors and into the bitter January air where the wind slapped my face like the last insult of a job I'd given everything to. I didn't look back. I already knew exactly where I needed to go. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. I just dropped my bag by the door and let the silence settle around me, broken only by the low hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock that had been 2 minutes slow since the day I hung it. My coat stayed on. The cold didn't bother me, not anymore. The filing cabinet in my home office hadn't been touched in months. Years, maybe. It was a matte black beast in the corner, heavy and stubborn like it resented being forgotten. The bottom drawer stuck for a second, then gave in with a groan that echoed in the quiet. I crouched down, flipping through folders I didn't remember keeping, old vendor agreements, conference travel forms, handwritten notes from people long gone. And then in the very back, under a faded post-it marked original copy. 2016, I found it. The envelope was thick, the paper inside still crisp. My signature on the last page looked like it belonged to someone more hopeful. But it was page 8 that made me laugh sharp loud, a sound too big for the room. If terminated without cause, employee shall receive 15% of quarterly net profit in lieu of standard severance. 15%. I leaned back on my heels, the words echoing in my mind. Brant thought he'd outmaneuvered me, cut me out right before bonuses to pocket a little more for the executive pool. But he hadn't even read the clause that guaranteed I'd walk away with more than anyone in that building. Especially after the interstate logistics deal I'd just closed, the one, projected to bring in over $30 million this quarter. $30 million. 15%. I did the math once, then twice slower. $4.5 million. I stood knees cracking and padded into the kitchen. The cork on the bottle of Shiraz came off easier than expected. I poured a glass, took one slow sip, and reached for my phone. The number was still there. I hadn't called it since the settlement case back in 2019. Damian Reese. I hit dial. When he picked up on the second ring, I said only one thing. They finally did it. I need your eyes on something. The bar Damien chose was the kind of place where no one asked questions, and the jukebox hadn't been updated since Nirvana was still on the charts. He was already there when I walked in, nursing a bourbon in a glass that looked like it had seen better days. Same could be said for him. He stood as I approached, and I noted the streaks of gray that hadn't been there when we last crossed paths. Still wiry, still wearing that too thin blazer like he hadn't realized winter had arrived. We didn't hug. We never had that kind of relationship. He just pointed to the booth across from him and said, "Show me." I slid the contract across the table. He didn't speak for a full minute, just scanned, flipped, then reread page 8. A low whistle escaped his lips. 15%, he murmured. They let you keep this. They forgot I wrote it, I said, or they thought I forgot. He leaned back, eyes still on the paper. It's ironclad, executed, countersigned. If they terminated you without cause, they owe you more than $4 million. Then he looked at me. But they won't admit that. They'll lie. Backdate warnings, fake performance memos, invent a behavioral issue, maybe even pull the not aligned with company vision trick. They'd have to rewrite history, I said. Damien shrugged. You think that stops people with 7-figure bonuses on the line? You need someone inside, someone who saw what they said the moment you left. The emails, the meetings, the scramble to justify the firing. That's your proof. I didn't hesitate. I know who. He raised an eyebrow. Iris Chi, I said. Junior analyst. I trained her from scratch. Brant always acted like she was just a keyboard with legs. Perfect, Damien said. Invisible and furious. That's the best kind. He pushed the contract back toward me, tapping the margin. They're going to wish they read this. I slid it back into my bag and stood. They're going to wish they remembered who did. By the time I left the bar, I was already dialing Iris's number. Iris picked the ramen bar we used to hit when deadlines ran late and expense accounts ran dry. Back then, we'd huddle in the corner booth with cold fingers and lukewarm broth, complaining about bad code and worse coffee. She was already seated when I arrived, hands wrapped around a glass of water like it held more than hydration. When I slid into the booth, she didn't waste time with small talk. They told everyone you left voluntarily, she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes, sharp as ever, were simmering. Voluntarily, a week before bonuses. Nobody believes it. I exhaled. Brant always did have a flair for fiction. She snorted. He moved into your office, Althea, took down your whiteboard, put up a framed quote, something idiotic about innovation, and he's been strutting around like he's the architect of the Q4 numbers. That caught me. The deal did it close. She nodded. 2 days after they fired you. It's massive. Final numbers aren't public, but it's being counted in Q4 projections. Execs are already calculating their bonus shares off it. I sat back, letting that settle. My signature wasn't on the closing docs, but the deal bore my fingerprints. Every clause, every risk flag, every number that made it profitable. Iris leaned in. 3 others were cut last week, too. All mid to senior, no warnings. All told it was realignment. But Brant's been telling people it's about trimming fat before board review. And padding his pool, I said, classic. I can look. She offered voice lower now. Internal drive, time-stamped files, HR folders, Slack threads, anything shady, I'll find it. But it has to come from a personal account and only to you. I nodded. No names, no forwarding. You're a ghost. She tapped her phone once, like sealing the pact. They forgot I can disappear just as easily as I can retrieve. We finished our meal in silence. When the check came, I paid in cash and left through the side door while she stayed behind. She knew the rules. If they were going to bury me, I needed the evidence they'd left in their own wake. The email from Iris came at 2:14 a.m. Subject line, blank body empty. Just 4 attachments, each one named like a threat in slow motion. Althea. Vos PI Puan Docx warning. Memo final docs HR review core docs termination justification doc. I downloaded them with shaking hands, heart pounding as I opened the properties tabs first. No need to read the lies yet. The metadata told me more than words ever could. Date created October 5th, 9:12 a.m. I was fired October 4th. I didn't even open the documents. I just stared at that timestamp like it was a confession written in blood. They hadn't just invented a narrative. They did it the day after I was gone, then shoved it into the system like it had always been there. I forwarded everything to Damien without a word. He called 7 minutes later, no preamble. They just gave us a loaded gun, he said low and even. I thought you'd say that. They're stupid, lazy. These aren't PDFs. They didn't even scrub the file history, and unless someone at IT knows how to forge a Windows timestamp, this is the end of the road for their story. I clicked into one of the files. The first paragraph claimed I'd raised my voice during a strategy session called Brandt's Leadership Erratic and refused to implement key directives. The irony that meeting had ended with donuts. I'd bought them. I still had the receipt. None of these are signed, I said. Of course not. They didn't have time. They probably expected you to disappear. I closed the files one by one quietly, like putting out small fires. They should have known better, I said. Damien's voice crackled. I told you. They forgot who you are. I pulled up my calendar and opened a new event. Title Reckoning Stage 1. I stared at the empty time slot for a long second, then set the date for Monday morning. Because now it wasn't just about the money. It was about proving I hadn't just been erased, I'd been rewritten. And I was ready to restore the original draft. Maxwell Cruz found me through LinkedIn. His message was short and blunt. Heard what happened. We should talk. It's bigger than just you. We met at a diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt apology. He looked worse than I remembered, eyes sunken tie, askew fingers twitching against the handle of his mug. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. They fired me 2 weeks ago, said it was downsizing, but I'd already filed an internal flag. What kind of flag, I asked. Q4 entries, revenue recognition. They were dumping deferred income from Q1 and Q2 into Q4 projections, your deal included. I froze. They moved the revenue forward. He nodded. Made it look like Q4 spiked organically, inflated the bonus pool by at least 30%. When I asked about it, Brandt said it was just reallocating revenue for investor optics. He slid a flash drive across the table. Spreadsheets, emails, original forecasts. I backed everything up before they revoked my access. I took it without a word. They buried me fast, he added. Called me negative. Said I wasn't a team player. They didn't expect me to have receipts. They never do, I said quietly. Later that night, I plugged the drive into my laptop while Damien sat across from me at my kitchen table. He scrolled through the spreadsheets with surgical focus, pausing on a tab labeled Q4 Bonus Pool Projection, Revised. This isn't severance, he said finally. This is financial misconduct. Fraud if you stretch it. Enough to make an auditor nervous. I watched the glow of the screen reflect off his glasses. I thought about Brandt's grin in that conference room, how sure he'd looked, how unshakable. They use my deal to fund their own bonuses, I said. He nodded. And buried you the moment it cleared. If this goes public, it won't, I said already, reaching for my phone. Not yet, because if I wanted real leverage, I needed one more move, one more voice from inside. One that had already proven she could disappear and come back with fire. The envelope arrived by courier. Heavy paper, thick seal, the kind of presentation that tries to feel generous while stinking of desperation. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it on my kitchen counter while the kettle hissed behind me. When I finally unfolded the letter, it read exactly as I expected, a one-time payment of $200,000, a full non-disclosure agreement, binding and immediate. And of course, no admission of wrongdoing, just a clean break as if they were the ones doing me a favor, as if silence could be bought in bulk. I forwarded a scan to Damien, who called before I'd even finished my tea. "They think you're still playing defense," he said. "They know you've got them. They just don't know how badly." I could hear the grin in his voice, but mine didn't come. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt insulted. That number was less than 5% of what they owed. It wasn't a compromise, it was a dare. I reached into the drawer beside me, grabbed a pen and scrawled one word across the offer in thick, deliberate strokes. Declined. Then I ripped the pages in half, then in quarters, letting them fall into the trash like old receipts. "We're not settling," I said. "We're setting the trap." Damien didn't ask what I meant. He just said, "What's your next move, Iris?" I said. "If there's more buried files, more threads they think they deleted, she'll know where to look." He paused. "You think she's still watching? I know she is." I didn't wait. I typed out a short message, encrypted it, and sent it to the burner email she gave me. It didn't need to be long, just a single sentence. "They tried to buy me out. Time to light the match." Then I closed the laptop, poured another cup of tea, and waited for the fire to arrive. The room smelled like over-polished wood and tension. A long glass table, bottled water lined in military formation, and enough LED lighting to interrogate a spy. I sat across from Brant, who kept checking his watch like time might rescue him. To his right was the CEO, Harold Winslow, gray suit, gray eyes, gray soul. Next to him, their legal counsel, Janine Harper, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. And beside me, Damien, calm as stone, flipping through a manila folder like it contained someone's obituary. He waited exactly 8 seconds before speaking. "Let's begin." He slid a flash drive across the table. Janine inserted it into her laptop. The screen behind her flickered to life. First exhibit, Damien said, voice smooth. Metadata from 4 internal documents submitted to HR as justification for Ms. Voss's termination. The screen lit up with timestamps. All 4 files warnings, reviews, memos created on October 5th, 29th, 12 a.m. I was terminated October 4th. No one spoke. Damien clicked again. The screen now showed a breakdown of revenue reallocation for Q4 annotated emails and a sworn statement from Maxwell Cruz. Highlighted in yellow, a directive from Brant to fold deferred revenue forward into Q4 inflating projections before bonuses were calculated. This, Damien said, is not just cause. This is a cover-up. Brant laughed brittle and forced. "We didn't forge anything." Harold raised one hand without looking at him. "Brant," he said, quiet but cold. "You told me this was clean. It is. I thought you were clever." Harold said, standing. "Get out of this room." The silence was a chasm. Brant stammered, stood too quickly, and knocked his chair over as he left. No one picked it up. Janine tried to speak, but Harold just waved her down. Then he turned to me. "Miss Voss?" he said. "Let's speak privately." I stood, collected my papers, and followed him out of conference room number 7, past the glass walls, the frozen faces, and the still warm seat where Brant's fall had begun. Harold closed the door behind us with the kind of finality that made even silence feel like a verdict. We were alone in the adjoining conference suite, the windows drawn, the table bare. He didn't sit. Neither did I. "I assume this isn't about dragging us through court," he said. I kept my voice level. "That depends on whether you plan to insult me again." He nodded once the faintest twitch of a concession. "What do you want?" I opened the folder I'd prepared that morning. The list was brief. First, I said the 15% of Q4's net profit. Based on current projections, that's approximately $4.5 million. He didn't flinch. Second, a $150,000 consulting fee paid to Maxwell Cruz. Label it however you want, just make sure it clears before the quarter ends. Still no reaction. Third, a signed letter of recommendation for Iris Chi. Anonymous source if you must, but it comes from your desk and it's glowing. Finally, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face, but he swallowed it. And fourth, I continued my personnel file. I want the termination redacted and replaced with voluntary departure in good standing. In writing, in HR's system, permanently. He stared at me for a long moment as if weighing the cost, not in dollars, but in ego. Then he stepped to the table, picked up a pen from the tray and clicked it once. You'll have it all. By Monday. I nodded. Good. He turned to leave, but I wasn't done. One more thing, I said. He paused. You're not paying me off, I told him. You're buying your reputation back. His face gave nothing away. He left the room without another word. When I returned to the outer conference space, Damien stood waiting. He didn't ask for details. He just looked at me and nodded once like we'd both crossed the same bridge and watched it burn behind us. By the time we stepped into the elevator, I already knew exactly how I wanted this story to end. The wire hit my account at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. No note, no fanfare. Just a number so large my banking app paused, like it needed a moment to catch its breath. I didn't cry. I just opened a spreadsheet, zeroed out every line of my sister's medical debt, and closed the portal for good. Then I called the bank and paid off her mortgage. Her voice cracked when I told her, but I didn't stay on the line long. Some victories are too sacred to narrate aloud. The cottage I bought sat near the northern edge of Lake Geneva, modest, but sun-warmed with no neighbors close enough to ask questions. The first thing I unpacked was a tea kettle. The second was my laptop. The review took 15 minutes to write. No names, no threats, no bitterness. Just bullet point precision phrased like a cautionary tale for anyone naive enough to trust performance reviews written after the fact. I wrote about last-minute restructurings before bonus season, about performance documents created post-termination with mismatched timestamps, about revenue allocation irregularities timed to maximize executive payouts. Nothing false, nothing traceable, but everything true. I ended it with one sentence. They signed the clause themselves. All I did was read it. By Friday, it had 20,000 shares. Glassdoor lit up like a warning flare. Former employees started commenting. Current ones sent anonymous confirmations. One recruiter messaged me privately to ask if I'd consider consulting on ethics remediation. I told him I was busy, because I was. I was standing on a dock with bare feet and no emails, watching the water settle into itself. Damien had called earlier to say Maxwell received his payment and Iris's new employer had called her an indispensable hire. She cried when she told me. I smiled and poured another glass of wine, the expensive kind, the kind that never came with a corporate card. Then I hit log out, closed the laptop, and let the silence wrap around me like a final contract that needed no signature.